The financier Lockhart is sent to a mysterious Swiss clinic to retrieve his boss, but finds himself entangled in the dark secrets of the facility. As he investigates further, he encounters horrifying discoveries and risks his health and sanity, plunging into the madness and terrifying truth of the clinic. The movie begins with a businessman working late in the office. Suddenly, he is plagued by chest pain. He drinks water from the cooler, but the heart attack doesn't go away. The businessman collapses lifeless in the deserted office. Only his photo on the wall, as the best employee of the year, looks indifferently at the unfolding tragedy. The train rushes through the picturesque landscapes of the Swiss Alps. It carries the main character, a young financier named Lockhart, on a business trip. He chews nicotine gum and doesn't get off the phone, doing deals and making money. The trip is interrupted by a flashback. Lockhart moves into a new office. His superiors appreciate him and call him upstairs. He is full of optimism. However, the board of directors shows him a strange letter from the CEO Pembroke, who has gone to an alpine sanatorium and sent a notification that he is quitting the business. But the problem is that his signature is crucial for the impending deal. Lockhart is sent on a business trip to find and bring the CEO back to New York. In this way, he must atone for the guilt of financial machinations. Otherwise, he will end up in prison. Before leaving, he promises his mother in the nursing home. She gives him a handmade ballerina figurine as a keepsake and says goodbye to her son, certain that he won't return. Along the winding road, Lockhart is driven past a village at the foot of a mountain, on top of which the sanatorium is visible. The driver tells a legend that once there stood a castle belonging to a baron obsessed with pure blood. The peasants burned down the estate when he intended to marry his own sister. They enter the premises. The young businessman sees elderly people in white clothes, enjoying the fresh air. Lockhart asks them to wait and goes to the reception. Today's visit is closed, so Lockhart asks to call the administrator. While waiting, the young man tries to make a call to the office, but there is no reception here. He wanders through a green lawn and notices a wall of an ancient chapel. A ventilation window in the basement converses with the administrator. The young man notices an old photo from the sanatorium counter at the site of the burned-down castle. The doctor treats him with the local miraculous water, while simultaneously giving him vitamins from a blue bottle. The administrator suggests visiting in the evening when the procedures are finished. The protagonist has no choice but to return to his car. On the way out, he notices a girl in a blue dress on the fortress wall. On the way back to the car, a real deer crashes into it, causing a commotion. Lockhart loses consciousness and wakes up in a sanatorium room. He is greeted by a cast on his leg and Dr. Heinrich Vollmer. The doctor informs him that he has reported the unforeseen circumstances to the authorities and will have to spend a few days in the sanatorium himself. The main thing is to drink plenty of water for successful acclimatization. After the conversation, Lockhart, standing by the window, watches as the window in the base of the chapel is being repaired. Then he drinks the glass of water and notices a small speck on the glass, which turns out to be some kind of bug. The young man wanders through the building, watching as patients, under the supervision of the staff, engage in various water procedures. Soon, he is also invited to steam baths in a sauna filled with steam. At some point, Lockhart gets lost and realizes that the passage behind him has disappeared. He finds himself in a closed room with no way out, but after a few moments he sees a corridor with a fleeting glimpse of a deer at the end. He goes there and finds Pembroke, the purpose of his visit. The old man refuses to return to the city for the sake of business, speaks about the need for purification, and then remembers the protagonist's father. They started together before he betrayed him. Suddenly, the old man agrees to return home for a few days. Lockhart asks the receptionist to call a taxi, and he waits on the street, where Mrs. Watkins, a great fan of puzzles, approaches him. She studies the history of this place and the local legends. The protagonist sees the girl in the blue dress. Her name is Hannah, and she is a special patient. Lockhart confesses that he will leave soon, to which she wonders why he would want to leave. The beautiful landscapes make the young man contemplate this. Upon his return, Lockhart cannot find Pembroke in the dining hall, where the patients are with Dr. Vollmer. The doctor admits that he feels unwell after the conversation about work, and he has been sent for special procedures. The young man breaks into a scream, but suddenly his nose starts bleeding, and he falls unconscious. Vollmer examines him in the office. Lockhart, at such a young age, already needs special care. Yappy agrees to the doctor's proposal, but as soon as he leaves, the young man fights off the medical card, noticing that in one vial, besides the liquid, there is something foreign, resembling a parasite. Lockhart is immersed in a sensory deprivation tank, and he is warned that the absence of stimuli can lead to hallucinations. Floating in the liquid, the hero recalls his childhood, but suddenly notices numerous eels. He tries to get the attention of the nurse, but she is preoccupied and talking to the nurse, trying to surface. Lockhart loses the oxygen hose and suffocates in the water, unable to open the lid. When his pulse drops, he sees a vision of his father's death. His father stopped the car with his son on the bridge, got out onto the road, and jumped over the railing. The orderly resuscitates Lockhart, and they inspect the chamber, finding no eels inside. In the room, the protagonist looks at photos and notices abnormalities with the jaws. He is distracted by a strange noise from the restroom. The handle of the toilet tank is moving on its own. Approaching the toilet, the young man notices a worker pushing a cart with a body towards the chapel. The next morning, he converses with Mrs. Watkins, telling her that the villagers burned down the castle not because of Jaime Lannister cosplay, but due to medical experiments. The Baron abducted people for the sake of these experiments. Their desiccated bodies were found in the fields. Lockhart suspects that the Baron was searching for a cure for his wife. They stop the procedures for the lady. The young man inspects the door to the tower, but the worker drives him away. However, Lockhart still goes to it. He asks to be taken to the village on a bicycle, offering a memorable ballerina figurine received from his mother just before her death as payment. Together, they descend from the mountain to the village. Lockhart leaves the girl alone in the pub and goes to the veterinarian across the street to consult about Pembroke. The result turns out to be interesting. Despite the abundance of drinking water at the sanatorium, tooth loss is associated with dehydration. The Scottish vet adds to the legend. The Baron's sister-in-law was infertile, and each attempt to conceive resulted in a miscarriage of a deformed fetus. At the end of the conversation, the veterinarian cuts open a deer's belly that had drunk water from the mountain spring. Its intestines are full of live eels. In the pub, Lockhart calls the office. It turns out that the doctor didn't inform anyone about the accident. The protagonist wants to talk to Hannah about what is happening in the sanatorium, but she has already caught the eye of a local punk. A fight breaks out, which is interrupted by the appearance of Dr. Vollmer. He takes the escapees back to Hannah's room, and they almost argue. The girl feels pain in her abdomen, but the doctor promises to cure her. Lockhart dreams of a naked Hannah in a bathtub filled with live eels. He wakes up from the nightmare and sees a worker rolling an empty gurney out of the basement. In front of the mirror, the businessman notices that one of his teeth is loose and easily comes off. He goes to the reception desk to report it, but when the nurse leaves, he sees Pembroke's current location on the appointment list, indicating he is in the transfusion wing. The hero heads there, trying to avoid being noticed by the staff. Near the elevator, there is a gurney with a body. Suddenly, the lying old man opens his eyes and screams, which distracts the orderlies from the elevator. While they examine the screaming man, Lockhart sneaks into the cabin and descends further. He finds several rooms with hydrotherapy chambers. In another room, Mrs. Watkins lies on a gurney. She tells him that she left clues for Alucard. It is revealed that the Baroness was pregnant, but the mob cut the fetus from her womb and threw it into the lake. However, the baby survived. The young man notices parasites under the woman's skin and recoils in horror, dropping a metal cabinet. The noise attracts the orderlies, from whom he hides behind one of the countless doors. There are numerous tanks of water here, in which people are floating, including the CEO of Pembroke. In anger, Lockhart tries to break the glass, but to no avail. He runs upstairs using the stairs, but encounters the orderlies and Dr. Vollmer. The medics drag him to the dental office to examine Lockhart's tooth. They put clamps on him and proceed to drill his front tooth. After escaping the dental chair, the young man gets into a car that brought in another patient and asks them to take him away urgently. They drive to the police station, where Lockhart reports about the illegal experiments. However, when the authority representative comes out, the hero sees the company's signature blue vial of medicine in the cabinet. The police officer returns with Dr. Vollmer, who labels Lockhart as a patient suffering from hallucinations and aggressive behavior. Pembroke appears, confirming that the young man threatened him. The fact that the old man is alive shatters Lockhart's certainty. He doubts his own thoughts and returns to the sanatorium. In the morning, he sits at the table in his room before the records. Mrs. Watkins draws his attention to the sound of the flushing tank handle jerking. When he lifts the lid, he sees numerous eels inside, but they vanish as if washed away into the sewage after a second. Lockhart breaks the toilet to check, but the eels never return. He writes a letter to the board of directors, similar to the one Pembroke wrote before. Then he goes through a series of procedures, but at one point, the young man shatters a glass of water, and a shard cuts the cast on his leg. Everything is fine. His leg is not broken as the doctor claimed. It was just a trick. Demolishing a wall, he enters the basement with a shovel in hand. Inside, he finds underground lakes and an old laboratory where preserved dissected eels, numerous records, and deformed human embryos are kept. There's also a collection of human faces and an altar with a portrait of the Baroness, who bears a striking resemblance to Hannah, only slightly older. Descending further, Lockhart sees a stretcher with a body covered by a sheet. The deceased, Mrs. Watkins, is being carried by a worker, hiding. Lockhart witnesses the worker disposing of the bodies into the lake, where eels attack him. A fight breaks out between the worker and Lockhart. Using a brick, Lockhart smashes the worker's head and escapes. Hannah, frightened and unaware of what is happening, goes to the dining hall to see Dr. Vollmer. Upon seeing blood on her plate, Dr. Vollmer in turn rejoices. Lockhart appears and seems to want to set her free. The doctor tries to negotiate, but Lockhart interrupts him, explaining to the patients that they are being deceived and poisoned with the mysterious water. The elderly rise from their seats, but not to protest. Instead, they seize the insolent youth, Lockhart. He is taken down to the transfusion wing, where he is placed in a decompression chamber. Dr. Vollmer explains that the water in the lake allows the eels to live tens of times longer than their normal lifespan. However, it is toxic to humans if not properly filtered. Human bodies serve as the filters, and from them, the enigmatic blue medicine is extracted. This medicine helps the locals live for many years. Later, the doctor tells Hannah that she has grown from a girl into a woman. She goes to Lockhart, who is sitting on a bench outside, and returns the ballerina to him, saying he falsely gave her hope that she could leave from there. After all, the doctor will never let her go. Suddenly, the young man no longer understands why he should leave here at all. It's so beautiful here. In the evening, dozens of sanatorium staff and village residents celebrate a wedding ceremony for the doctor and Hannah. Farmer leads the girl to the underground lake where the laboratory, altar, and bed are located. Here, they are meant to conceive a child. Hannah refuses, but the man ties her up in revenge. The girl hits him in the face, causing his skin to split on his forehead. Lockhart, holding the ballerina in his hands, snaps out of his delusional state, the fog in his mind, recalling the words of the late Mrs. Watkins. He smashes the glass in the administrator's office with a photograph from a century ago during the construction of the sanatorium. In the picture, a man with a bandaged head holds the hand of a little girl in a light-colored dress. Realizing that the doctor is the Baron who discovered the anti-aging medicine, and Hannah is his daughter, the hero runs into the underground chambers, pouring gasoline everywhere. Baron tries to stop him, even removing his leather mask, revealing a green charred mess underneath. But Lockhart still sets the place on fire. Sparks reach the ventilation system and ignite the curtains in the hall, where the medical staff is having a ball in honor of the wedding ceremony. A brawl ensues, and the Baron almost feeds Lockhart to the eels. When the girl appears, she strikes a powerful blow, driving the shovel into her father's disfigured face. Escaping from the underground, Lockhart and Hannah marvel at the fire as the patients continue to dance, leaving the engulfed building behind. They leave on a bicycle, but crash into a car at a turn. Inside the car are members of the board of directors. Ignoring their orders, Lockhart gets back on the bicycle and rides away with the 200-year-old girl smiling like a madman.